Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're diving into letter 11 of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And this letter is surprisingly relevant to modern culture because Screwtape turns his attention towards something most people would never immediately think of as spiritually dangerous: humor, laughter, sarcasm, and mockery. And the way these things can either bring people closer to truth or slowly numb them to it altogether. Let's get into it. Screwtape begins by distinguishing between different kinds of humor. And interestingly enough, he admits that some forms of laughter are actually dangerous for the enemy. Real joy, genuine delight, and healthy friendship are difficult for them to corrupt because authentic joy reflects something true, something good. When people laugh together out of honesty, closeness, and love, there's something deeply human about it, something God given, and Screwtape hates it. But then Lewis pivots into another kind of laughter entirely: humor that doesn't celebrate truth, but avoids it. Humor that turns everything into irony, everything into sarcasm, everything into a joke. Because once nothing is taken seriously, conviction begins to fade, and eventually even morality itself starts feeling embarrassing. Lewis introduces a really important word here: flippancy. The attitude where nothing is treated as sacred, nothing is approached with reverence, everything becomes casual, dismissive, or sarcastic. Screwtape calls flippancy one of the enemy's greatest inventions. Why? Because it protects people from serious thought. A flippant person rarely examines themselves deeply. In fact, they often speak of a new subject as if they've already discovered something foolish or ridiculous about it, when in reality they may have never seriously examined it at all. That's part of the deception. Flippancy creates the appearance of intelligence without requiring the humility of actual thought. The joke itself becomes a substitute for understanding. And once someone learns to laugh at something before honestly considering it, they can dismiss truth without ever giving it serious thought. And there's another benefit to this for the enemy. It creates a reluctance to challenge the opinion itself, because once an idea has been framed as a joke, questioning it suddenly feels awkward. Seriousness feels socially dangerous. People become afraid that if they push back, they'll look foolish, uptight, unintelligent, or unable to take a joke. And that social pressure quietly discourages honest discussion before it ever begins. And we see this everywhere now. People joke about marriage, purity, addiction, sin, politics, God, eternity itself. Not always because they're carefully reasoned against those things, but because sarcasm creates emotional distance. If everything becomes a joke, nothing ever has to confront the heart. Mockery becomes a shield against conviction. And eventually, a person can become so practiced at ironic detachment that they lose the ability to approach anything with sincerity at all. That's what makes flippancy so spiritually dangerous. It doesn't merely attack truth directly, it teaches people to avoid taking truth seriously in the first place. Screwtape explains that the enemy loves a culture that cannot stay serious for very long, a culture addicted to amusement, constant entertainment, constant noise. And this might be more relevant today than at any point in history. Most people are never alone with their thoughts anymore. The second silence appears, we reach for stimulation: music, videos, memes, podcasts, notifications. And because of that, many people rarely slow down long enough to genuinely reflect, to meditate, to wrestle with conviction, to sit quietly before God. The enemy doesn't always need to convince someone that truth is false. Sometimes he simply keeps them distracted long enough that they never seriously consider it at all. And humor becomes a perfect tool for that. Because if every serious conversation immediately becomes a joke, then nothing ever reaches the soul deeply enough to create change. One of the subtle points Lewis makes here is that modern culture increasingly treats sincerity as awkward. Depth feels uncomfortable, earnestness feels embarrassing, and people become afraid of appearing too serious about anything, especially faith. The enemy loves this because once sincerity becomes socially dangerous, convictions begin disappearing quietly. People become afraid of looking intense, devoted, convicted, or too religious, so instead of honestly wrestling with truth, they hide behind humor, behind irony, behind sarcasm. And eventually the joke itself becomes the identity. Lewis is warning us that when a society loses its ability to treat anything as sacred, it slowly loses its ability to recognize holiness at all. But Lewis is careful to separate joy from mockery. Christianity is not opposed to laughter. In fact, joy is deeply Christian. Real joy, celebration, friendship, these are gifts from God. The problem is not humor itself, it's humor detached from truth. Mockery instead of wisdom, sarcasm instead of sincerity, entertainment instead of reflection. Because eventually, if all we consume is amusement, we lose the ability to grieve, repent, reflect, and sit quietly before God. And a soul that never slows down long enough to reflect becomes incredibly easy to shape. So what's the answer? Not becoming humorless, not becoming gloomy. The answer is recovering reverence, learning how to laugh honestly while still taking eternity seriously. Because Christianity is not shallow, it's joyful, but it's also weighty. God created laughter, but he also calls us to wisdom, to reflection, to depth. And Lewis is reminding us that the enemy is perfectly content for us to laugh our way into spiritual numbness, as long as we never stop long enough to ask where we're headed. In this letter, Lewis reminds us that not every spiritual danger looks dark or dramatic. Sometimes the enemy works through distraction, through irony, through making everything feel casual. So let's be people who still know how to laugh, but who also know when to be still, when to take truth seriously, and when to lie down in green pastures. Because a faith that can never become serious doesn't usually become deep. Thanks for being here, and even more thanks for contemplating. Next week, we'll be diving into letter 12 to understand what Screwtape means when he says murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. And I'll see you then.